Welcome back. 7:25 on your Monday morning, and Ukrainian President Zelensky is in Washington this morning, set to meet with key European leaders and President Trump this afternoon. Rob Huebert is the director of the Center for Military Security and Strategic Studies. He joins us this morning. Rob, thanks for your time. And of course, this on the heels of that meeting between Trump and Russian President Putin Friday. So let's start there. What is your assessment of what came from that meeting?
Well, I mean, the fact that the meeting took place at all is something that indicates the difficulties that the Ukrainians find themselves in. I mean, again, all the similarities were made to the Munich meeting back in 1988 or 1938 when the leaders of Britain and France met with the leaders of Italy and Germany without any representation by the Czechoslovakians. And so we have a sort of realization that this allows Putin to reemerge onto the world scene, well engaged in this war of aggression that he's been conducting since 2014. And so it was a big success for the Russians. The fact that nothing seemed to have come out of it in terms of substance or negotiations or the ability of Trump to make good of his brag that he was going to settle the war, of course, illustrates probably the weakness of the American position in this context.
What will you be looking for out of today's meeting with European leaders and of course, President Zelensky?
Well, the major thing to be watching is, does Zelensky make any further concessions to the Russians in terms of any of the negotiations? Because, again, we see the Russians putting forward pretty stark terms during the Alaskan meeting to the Americans, and the Americans did not dismiss them out of hand. And so it'll be interesting to watch how Zelensky, with what one assumes is going to be the support of the Europeans, basically tries to put a brake on some of the worst elements of what the Russians are demanding.
Yeah, and Rob, Canada not at that meeting today. What does that say to you?
Well, the fact that Stubbs, who is the leader of Finland, is being included in Canada isn't, I think probably points to the fact that Canada is seen irrelevant, despite the fact that we have actually contributed in material terms a considerable amount to the Ukrainians. But the fact that we're not being even considered in any of these discussions, I think points to the irrelevance of Canada, at least in the minds of both the Americans and the Europeans.
Obviously, the land back and forth, we're seeing some sort of leaked ideas about what Ukraine might have to give up. But of course, the big question around this is what kind of security guarantees will Ukraine have going forward that will be, long-term and that can be trusted? What would you need to see to be confident that peace can be preserved for Ukraine long-term?
Well, for the Ukrainians, the issue that's really a do or die issue is membership into NATO. Remember, the Russians signed an agreement that they promised not to invade Ukraine when the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons. That's signed. So the Ukrainians, after experiencing the invasions of 2014 and 2022, and knowing that the Russians don't follow any agreements that they signed, I think that they would see their only possibility of continued security as an independent state of getting membership within NATO.
Okay, and that sounds like a tough one for Russia to swallow. We'll continue to follow it. Big meeting today, Rob. As always, we very much appreciate your insight. That is Rob Huebert, the director of the Center for Military Security and Strategic Studies.